How are you all doing? Yeah! It's more like a work concert than economics discussion. If you're I hope you're all well slept, because if you're not, and first of all, thanks very much, Josh, for organising this. He's fucking spoiling you guys. Yeah. 3 events this month. I mean, that's just crazy. Yeah! So I was thinking of something interesting to talk about, and I failed. So we're going to talk about free markets. Just kidding. So it's an interesting thing because the title of the talk is putting the fun back in market fundamentalism. Because there's this thing going around where if you've got opinions that are similar to ours, you might have you been called a market fundamentalist ever? Not even on Twitter. Oh my god, it's obviously just me. So we've heard a lot about trusting the science recently. I wish these people would just trust the science, the economic science, that is. It just gets worse and worse and worse. Okay, we're off to a good start, because now I know I need to be serious. So, I want to talk a bit about why markets work, and why government must always be inferior at allocating resources to markets. Because if you just believe, if you say, markets are always better than government, they're always better than government. Well, always? Are you saying that there's never a situation ever where government won't be better than what? You must be that must just be a religious belief, right? You must be some kind of fundamentalist to believe that. Surely there must be some case in which you think that the government's going to be better than the market. No. So you would be religious if you didn't have a really bloody good reason to believe that was true. This guy does. He's giving the talk next week.
No.
Maybe the week after that.
Good for 2 minutes.
Cool. So, the reason, So the reason why it's called putting the fun back in market fundamentalism is because I think economics is fun. Because it's fun to understand the world that you're living in. Because someone tells you some argument that you've never heard of before, and you go, yeah, that's really true. Yeah, that makes sense. And it's an enjoyable feeling to feel like you get it. So I'm taking the term, so instead of batting heads with people and trying to argue, you can maybe present things in a way of let's try to understand this thing that is incredibly interesting. And I'm kind of embracing the term market fundamentalism because I'm just taking it at face value, which is, what does that mean, right? It just basically means that you think market shouldn't be violated. That's what makes you a market fundamentalist. So in the same way that if you're a religious fundamentalist, you don't believe that the tenets of your religion should be violated because they're extremely important, So, if that's what you're going to call me, a market fundamentalist, this is me testing out this material because I'd like to write a little book called, I don't know, maybe we should call it Putting the Fun Back in Market Fundamentalism. So I need to bounce my ideas off people to know if they're any good or not. So, the rational people. Tell me.
So if you're rational, then you know that somebody in government is no better than you are, and having them make a decision rather than you make the decision makes no sense.
Right, so that's...
each of us as individuals, as rational individuals, we make the market.
Right, exactly. And that's a good point, because I had, this is going to, speaking of religion, I had someone in, because people like to say, you're God, the free market. And I was like, the only, like you said, a market's just made out of People.
Created by people.
Created by people. So I was like, sorry to anyone that's offended by this. I was like, the only similarity between God and the free market is they're both figments of your imagination. There's no such thing as a market. There's only people. And people make up, people buying and selling things makes up a market. So why is the person in government, as you say, going to have better information on how to make a decision than you do? So,
if he does, he should be in jail.
well, if he does, one of the things I'd argue is, if the people in government had such a great insight into how to run everything, they probably wouldn't be in government, right? They'd be in some corporation getting paid $25, $100 million a year to run everyone's lives, because their deep and penetrating insight would be far better paid on the market than it will in government. So, when I was thinking about this, and they're like, well, there's a kind of rather glib response you could give to people, which is like, why is it not religious fundamentalist to believe that the government intervening in the market could be more effective than markets? Like, is that not, almost everyone assumes that a regulated market is better than an unregulated market. No one examines that belief. They don't have a class on it in school. How did they reach that conclusion? They just absorbed it from the culture. So you could say, well, how's that any more of a religious belief? But even though that's highly stimulating and I like it, it doesn't really explain our position. So it's not an evidence. So what's required of us is an explanation for why markets are better than government. And I kind of look at markets as a sieve for ideas, you go down gold prospecting, someone invents the fabulous blue, what do you call it? Another person invents the magical red doohickey, and you want one, you want the other, until someone comes along and mixes them together and creates the fabulous purple thingamajig, and everyone prefers that, and the process goes on and on. And I would argue that governments just don't have the feedback mechanism that markets have. So to quote from my book, did anyone mention that I've got a book?
I didn't see it, say the name. Universal
basic income for and against. Mostly against. Okay. Government departments are not in competition with other service providers, so they don't have much to compare their performance to. They can't optimize by, for example, adopting best practices developed by other companies, which are constantly evolving and innovating by trying alternative approaches. They're also paid for out of the public purse, whether or not their services are deemed satisfactory by their users. This removes the primary incentive placed upon private companies to find ways of lowering delivery costs, pressure from customers who always want the best quality service at the best price. In fact, much of the time, even if a government department is delivering poor outcomes because it's bloated and wasteful, it can blame its poor performance on not having enough money to do its job and receive a bigger budget the following year. When those who receive services have a choice between service providers and can take their business elsewhere, so to speak, it puts pressure on organisations to increase the quality of services while finding ways to decrease costs in order to keep their customers happy. And if that was a bit too much to take in quote form, you can find it in this book I heard, written by a really smart, bald, obnoxious Scottish guy.
How obnoxious.
Say the book! Say the book!
It's $40 for this copy.
Yeah.
So, that's a summary of some of the points. What Mises said, Ludwig von Mises, the great economist, is central planners are stabbing in the dark. They just need to guess what people want. Because even with the best of will, how do they have the information, right? I want to build a product, I can build it with 3 parts lumber, 2 parts rubber, 1 part steel, or 2 parts of each of them. How do I know what resources to use? Well, I go and look at the price, and if the price of lumber is really high, well, that says that lots of people want lumber, so I better just not. That's the market's way of saying, that's scarce, why don't, if you better really need it, if you don't really need it, why don't you leave it there for someone else and just use some steel instead, okay? Because no resources are completely interchangeable, but there's various different ways to build products. We could maybe build a car that lasts for 100 years, but are you willing to pay the amount of money that it costs for the additional resources? How do you know if it's efficient or not? And this goes for regulators as well. They're trying, I'm going to come to that in a second, because most people aren't out and out communists, right? They don't think we should replace the market economy. They just think, oh, well, maybe the government can tweak it and, make it a little bit better than it is. So another great example is, if I'm a manufacturer, the best place, it looks like the best place for me to put my factory is right beside my supplier, because then I've got no transport costs. You can just deliver them next door. But that might be highly valued real estate, in which case the price of that plot of land might tell me, you better put your factory across town somewhere, because it's worth the money for them to drive the resources to you. So what I would really like to do is, I guess, oh, thank you. You're a princess. Okay, well, before I go on, also government officials are subject to all different kinds of incentives and pressures as well. I mean, who writes the policy documents for regulation of the banks? It's people who used to work in banks, the revolving door from pharma. Who's paying for the regulations? Who benefits from regulations? The harder it is to qualify as a hairdresser, the better it is for all the people who are already hairdressers. So, the hairdressers union, I'm not saying there is one, but it's just by way of an analogy. If I decreed that Starbucks was the only company that was allowed to serve coffee in Denver, do you think the coffee in Denver would get better or worse? That's the situation the government's in. So,
No, but I have stock in Starbucks, so thank you.
okay. So, that might actually help. Yeah, it would definitely help the lobbyists on behalf of Starbucks who have the stocks in Starbucks. I read the statistic which I love to quote, because most people think the government's meant to be a referee, but more often than not, why would the government be a referee? The government is a power centre, and the corporation is a power centre. So why wouldn't they work together? That's just incredibly naive, right? To think that the government's going to be a referee. Of the $5.8 billion spent by America's 200 most politically active corporations between 2007 and 2012, out of all the money, of the $5.8 billion they spent on federal lobbying and campaign contributions, they got $741 in return in kickbacks per dollar spent. The Sunlight Foundation calculated. Now, I don't know a line of business where for every $1 I invest in, I get $741 back. If any of you do, please come and speak to me at the end. The thing is, what this does is, what am I going to do? What is it in my interest to do? Is it in my interest to improve my product, to spend lots of money on research, or to lobby the government? As soon as you've got the ability to lobby the government, it corrupts the whole market. Because as soon as I can make more money by lobbying, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop serving the customers. So that's why I'm a market fundamentalist. Don't touch it, because you don't know what you're going to break. Okay, so I think the best thing to do is to take an example in the regulation realm because, as I say, most people aren't out and out communists. They don't want to replace the market with central planning. Just put your hands up at some time to tell me how much time I've got left, so I can.
Whatever you want. 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Or-
Go.
35 minutes. That's it.
2 hours.
Minimum. 1 hour.
I've been
5
3
hours.
Just keep going till you're done.
Correct answer.
I just bought your book. so
First of all, this is
Okay,
awesome.
go.
This is your book, right?
We all
Yeah,
there?
that's
About
it.
the right-
Well, you should buy it here because you got it signed. Well, it's one more for someone else.
I bought the Kindle version.
Oh, there you go.
I'm gonna work on it.
Okay, labor laws is a good example, I think, because they're almost ubiquitously seen as something that's favourable and beneficial. Not in this audience, but out there. Well, you need some labour laws, some minimum wage, obviously health and safety. You don't want people dying at work. Like, how can that be bad? And that ranges everywhere from greedy capitalists are exploiting their workers to, do you want to go back to the Industrial Revolution where kids were going into factories or to just, I think, at least you should have a minimum standard. That's a pretty moderate position. Very few people would say all of labor laws are harmful. I must be some kind of fundamentalist to believe that all labor laws are harmful. But so this is just revision for some of you guys because I'm really well informed. But sometimes it's nice to work through things you've already thought of before anyway. So my case is all regulations, regardless of their intention, reduce the number of service providers, and as a consequence, the choices available to the consumer lead to a lowered, and therefore there's a lowering in the quality of goods and services and an increase in the price. Not only because if there's fewer suppliers, there's less competition, so there's an increase in price, but also because it costs money to comply with regulations. Now you need a lawyer, an accountant, an actuary. All of these bums should go and get a job making something like a table, or planting orange trees, because the more stuff there is in the market, that's basic supply and demand. The more stuff there is, the cheaper the stuff is, everyone's standard of living is better. But what about the worker? I said the choices available to the consumer are lower. Well, guess what workers are when they're not working? They're consumers. This is where Marx got it wrong. This is the main thing that Marx got it wrong. So whenever you talk to your Marxist friend, I'm being positive here. Right.
It was singular.
The first thing to say to him is, well, Marx only really considered workers in their capacity as workers. He never really considered them as in their capacity as consumers. And that's why in his own life, he had to admit, he changed his opinion. He said, the wages of workers will go down, down. The living standards will become worse and worse and worse. And then over the course of his life, he saw the poor people get richer. He said, no one believes that anymore. That's silly. He never mentioned, of course, that he was part of perpetuating the myth. He was like, no, we just meant in relative terms, they're going to get poorer. Well, no, they got richer because as consumers, even if their wage stayed similar or only went up slightly, what their wage could buy was more. So, this is Mises' great point. He really put a lot of emphasis on the consumer and how markets benefit the consumer. In other words, everyone. Okay, because everyone is a consumer. So, not only that, but from the other side, how do labor laws harm workers? Well, if you've got if you make it more expensive to employ people because you've got to comply with the labour regulations and employ an actuary and a lawyer and an accountant, there's less jobs available. So you just need to take whatever you can get. All right, now the company's bought these safety goggles for you at great expense, which you don't even need because none of the accidents in the workplace involved safety goggles, but because the central planner over there doesn't know what every factory in the whole fucking country needs, because they just made some general rule that everyone needs to comply with. It's back to your point. Who knows best what safety equipment is required in a factory? The only thing you do is you have the basic law, which says if you come to injury at work through the neglect of your employer, then you're entitled to compensation or bringing to suit for whatever's reasonable. Then you don't need any regulation, because then you figure it out. Because where do you think the money to pay for the safety equipment comes from? Does Mr. Starbucks, sorry, who's well known for owning a factory? Some entrepreneur. Does Mr. John D. Rockefeller go over to his safe, put in the combination, open the door and go, well, I guess Standard Oil's going to have to shell out for some safety equipment? No, the entrepreneur's got a certain amount of money to allocate to labour. And that includes all of the expenses for labour, the expense for the staff room, the expense for the gym, the pool, the childcare, all of it. And he goes, well, you know, what's reason? How many people can I afford and still make a profit? If you make it more expensive to employ people, then some of those people won't be employed. So, let me just see if I missed anything, because I'm busting it right here. I'm stabbing in the dark. So the government can at best apply a one-size-fits-all solution, and in most cases they won't fit. And they show these charts of, well, OSHA was created, which is the regulatory body that regulates workplace safety here. And if you look at the chart, the number of workplace deaths has gone down. So they say, well, that proves that OSHA saved people from dying at work. But what they don't show you is the whole period that we've got data, which demonstrates that the number of workplace safety rules were already going down for decades or even 100 years before OSHA was already instituted. Because I don't know if you know this or not, but most employers don't like it when their workers die on the job. It kind of... So, what did improve working conditions? It was markets. When everyone was really poor, when no one had any money, how can you make a workplace safe? The main thing is, can you just produce something that will sell well enough? But as people become more and more wealthy, they go, well, I don't fucking want to work in that shitty factory. It's a death trap. And then people who work with chemicals or lumber, some of the most dangerous jobs like lumberjack and things like that, they get paid a compensating amount of money to get a disproportionately high wage to take on those additional risks. So there was a great study that Brian Kaplan, no, it wasn't Brian Kaplan, it was Benjamin Powell. He went to the third world, places where they say that they're sweatshops. And he went to the places where they had sweatshops, which, by the way, typically pay 3 to 4 times what the average wage in that country is.
That's pretty good.
Well, I mean, it's good. It's your least worst option if you live in that country. So he would go in and say to the workers, you get a survey. Do you want better workplace safety? Do you want longer lunch break? Do you want I don't know, whatever amenities, a gym or fucking staff room, whatever it is? And they're like, yeah. But then when he asked, do you want that thing if it means a lower wage? Then they all said no. But here in America, where we've got a wealthy economy, you're willing to accept a slightly lower wage to have a staff room or a gym or childcare or a swimming pool on the premises or whatever, a disproportionate amount of money goes on healthcare, on health insurance. But that's more based on regulation or than anything else. But people have continued to decide that they would rather get their insurance through their employer. So basically, the all of that stuff is coming out of the employee's pocket. It's not coming out of Mr. Starbucks or Jeff Bezos or whatever. Because if it was, then people would have walked out and gone to another employer across the road who was willing to give them a slightly better conditions. Because George Eastman, great economist, he's got a really great analogy. He says, right, if I drive up to Manhattan and I move there in my car, I don't fucking want this car, right? It's like I can't park it anywhere. If I try and park it, it's incredibly expensive. I'm willing to give the car away. Just because I'm willing to give the car away doesn't mean I need to give the car away. Because someone's still going to give me a couple of $1,000 for that old banger, right? You know, someone wants it more than I do, so they can drive to Colorado.
Yeah!
So just because workers require a wage to live doesn't mean they need to accept whatever wage, otherwise, or whatever working condition. They'll accept those working conditions that the society is able to provide them at this stage of technological advancement. I think you get the point. So, let me just have a quick look. So, I write, the best defense of workers' rights is having the biggest choice of employers as possible. The more employers you have, the better. So, it's better if you don't have a minimum wage, because even if in the short term you have to accept a lower wage, at least if your boss is an asshole, you can just leave and go across the road and get another job. If they're killing all the jobs with a high minimum wage, well, I'm making $15 an hour. You're just going to have to take whatever shitty treatment you get. And that's that. The best thing is, if it's as cheap, if there's as many employers as possible, just because you want, like, I'm trying to tie it into the car, right? You can get rid of the car. Just because you don't want the car doesn't mean that you have to accept nothing from it. Just because they're technically able to pay you under $10 an hour doesn't mean that if your skills are suitable, they will, especially now that they don't have to employ all these bums, the lawyers and accountants and actuaries. No offense to any lawyers, accountants, actuaries, stenographers, whatever you do. Whatever works for you. Okay. And I think the bottom line is no one's going to pay you when you're not making them a profit. So that goes for training as well. So let's see. Okay, I'm just going to see if I can go through another couple of examples first, but these ones we're going to go through a little bit quicker. Julie, you're done. That's just a brief break. Can someone tell me what externalities are? I just want to get some audience participation.
Yeah, I'm totally willing. You got negative and positive externalities, my brother. You got things that happen in an interaction that cause some effect, that have an effect on other people, not necessarily related to the direct action that's taking place. So that externality, mostly negative when we talk about a lot of things, but it could be positive. Yeah, it could be positive.
If I put some aftershave on, it's a positive externality for everyone surrounding. But so in economic terms, externalities or markets, you have buyers and sellers. And if you buy a car and the exhaust fumes, if they are pollutants, the damage to them is external to your interaction between the buyer and the seller. And the collectivists come along and say, what about externalities? And the funny thing is, in the latter part of the 19th century, in the old form of law, the individual had a right to sue if, say, your field is beside the railway and the sparks come from the railway and set your field on fire. And that happens sometimes. Or if a smokestack's puffing out smoke and it covers your clothes, you could go and file a lawsuit against the factory owner, and they would have to compensate you. And that was a natural mechanism that I would say is congruent with what we should understand the free market to be. But what kind of happened was, this was documented in a book called The Transformation of American Law by Morton J. Horowitz. I've got it written down if you need it. And he said, well, basically a different kind of law took over, which was a more collectivist form of law, where they said, well, you greedy individual with your little petty black clothes and your burning field, don't you know it's progress we're pursuing here? We're trying to pursue progress. So your little good should not get in the way of the common good. So it's a kind of ironic thing that the collectivists are accusing us, individualists, of not being, of like allowing externalities to flourish. When it was the collectivist form of law that said, well, it's not about your personal concerns as an individual. It's about, industry is about the greater good. So if your clothes get covered in soot, that's tough shit. So that's kind of how we deal with the externalities argument. Okay, this is something I'm playing with a little bit here. I've not fully formed my ideas on this, so you guys are kind of like guinea pigs. Would anyone want to tell me a little bit about market failure? Do you understand what they mean, the leftists mean when they talk about market failure? Are you going to go again?
No, I would.
Do we have
I
another
wouldn't dare.
contestant?
I could. Well, I could, but I'll let somebody else.
Greed.
Yeah.
That's what the leftists would say.
Greed is a market failure. That's not exactly what I'm going
Well,
for.
I guess greed causing income inequality as a market failure.
Okay. I guess, yeah, please.
Food deserts.
Food deserts. That could be that could be considered a market failure. Okay, I was just like, usually in economics, when we talk about a market failure, that means that if the amount of a certain good or service that people would want to be delivered, hypothetically, if we could scan everyone's brain and find out what they really want at what price, they would want this much of that good or service, but they only get this much. I want to demonstrate by analogy, because a lot of libertarians will say, oh, market failure is a myth and it doesn't exist. But I think actually that's maybe not the right way to look at it, because you can look at it this way. If anyone's got some water, could they pass it in this direction, please? My mouth's getting really dry. So, market failure, yeah. The market.
No water, market failure.
So let's say you're in a restaurant with your friends, right?
Could happen to anybody.
Could happen to anyone, right? So it's a busy restaurant. So I raise my voice a little, so that I'm heard over everyone else. But then you at the next table, raise your voice a little until the point where everyone's shouting like this. And we all end up with our voices strained like mine is. So that is, by analogy, if I can put it this way, what would be good for each of us, for all of us, is if we just agreed to just keep our voices down a little bit, right? But what serves our rational interest as individuals, what suits our interests as a group is not the same as our interests as individuals, because I want to be heard, and so do you. So when libertarians say, oh, like market failures, that's just a made up thing, I think it's a little bit glib. I think you could hypothetically see a situation where, I don't know, maybe we want more maybe we want more school.
Cocaine.
Maybe we want more parks, okay? If we would all agree to have a park, then we could all chip in. But because we can't read each other's minds, we don't know how many parks to have. So hypothetically, that kind of thing could happen in the market. And people said this about things like lighthouses, but then it turns out when someone actually bothered to fucking look, they found out that way before the British government, for example, took over ownership of lighthouses, they found ways to do it. What I would say, like my response to that is kind of like, one of the jobs of an entrepreneur is to find ways to solve market failures. So for example, you've got this thing called a radio transmission, and it costs you money to put out a radio transmission. So who's going to buy that? I mean, people might want it, but first of all, we all subscribe to it, we all pay $10 a month. But then I realised, you know what, it's on the radio, I don't need to pay my $10 a month. So I withdraw, and you withdraw, and she withdraws, and then we all have to pay $11 a month. I don't want to pay my $11. So more people withdraw, and then it's 20, and then it's 30, and then it's 50, and then no one wants to pay $100 a month for your shit radio station. Especially now that you can't afford to get any good guests in it or anything like that. But someone came up with an idea. What we'll do is we'll put a radio program on which costs us money, and then we'll put ads in between the show, which gives us money, and that's how we'll balance it out. And they solved a market failure. So I think Reinhardt, my friend Reinhardt, can you explain the prisoner's dilemma?
Explain it. Talk to us.
Let me first.
Come up and use the mic, please.
Oh, I see.
I need a drink anyway.
Help us out.
I think the prisoner's dilemma everybody knows, but Antony brought it up when somebody tries to speak louder than another, he wins. And if the other speaks louder, then the other one wins. But if both speak loud, then both lose. And in the other scenario, if both agree beforehand to collaborate, then they both win. And so that's my analogy for the prisoner's dilemma.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So, if you and I are in prison, we're guilty of sin, we got the crack, we fucked the hose, whatever. But they don't know, they can't fucking prove it, right? They can't prove it. So they come to us and they're like, they separate us and they're like, did you do it? And I'm like, no, I didn't do it. They're like, well, if you tell on your buddy, we'll give you a shorter sentence. I'm like, oh, there's no way that I can lose on this one. Like, I'm going down. But the thing is, they're saying the same to my friend. But if my friend sings, if my friend sings as well, then we're going down for a real long time, okay? So I need to bet on whether he's going to tell on me or not. But it could be even that whatever happens, it's always in my interest to be a dirty, no good, stinking rat, right? So that's an example of, that's often used as an analogy for market failure. And it could be that a situation like that exists in the market. But here's the thing: if there's a bunch of other gangsters that are out there like, if you boys sing, we're going to kick your fucking ass. that changes the whole dynamic of the prisoner's dilemma. So my argument against market failure is we need to see the market not as a fixed thing. Like Reinhardt said, if before we got caught before we went out taking crack, banging hookers, whatever, right? He said, right, see, okay, this is gonna be a real fun night as long as we don't get caught. But if we do get caught, let's get our story straight, right? Then we know that no one's going to guess that we did the nasty, and because our stories are straight. So that's more like the market process. The market has a completely cyclical and ever-evolving method. So just because something appears to be a circumstance of market failure doesn't mean that it will always remain that way. And one of the things that entrepreneurs do is they find ways to solve market failures, and that's how they make lots of money. So there's, as I said, lighthouses were thought to be an example of this. There's instances where like beekeepers get together with apple farmers and situate their things next to each other because they provide each other with positive externalities. People come up with this stuff all the time. So, they say things like, well, you might not have all the information available. Okay, that's true. You might not have the information available on the best product. But that's why we have things that were created like TripAdvisor, like the process that eBay has with feedback, and it's very, very successful. And people have, they say, well, if you can't exclude people like from a firework display, why are there any fireworks displays? Because enough people are willing to pay for them because they want to sit close. But even so, you can create trade associations to share information, and people are endlessly creative in ways. Even the parks then, what we do is a big enough entrepreneur will come up and buy enough land or collaborate with other people to create a housing development that's got a part on the housing development, and they just throw it in with the price of your rent or the price of your mortgage, along with everything else you have to pay. Trash collection, and whatever else that we kind of need to chip in together. Even with like who will build the roads? Well, nowadays it's easier than ever to put an electronic tag in someone's car and meter how much they drive. So you could technically on private roads charge people in accordance to their usage, rather than forcing people who weren't using the service to pay for the service. So this is my kind of like haphazard attempt at explanation of why we're not being religious when we say that markets will always provide better outcomes on average over time than government can. Because the incentive structure is essentially completely different. Governments are stabbing in the dark. They're always spending someone else's money on someone else. Milton Friedman had this beautiful analogy where he said, well, when I spend my money on me, I want a cheap product at a good price. When I spend my money on you, I want a cheap product and I don't care about the quality of it. But when you spend your money on me, anyway, the matrix says, if I'm spending your money on me, I want a high quality good and I don't care about the cost. But if I'm spending your money on you, I don't care about the quality of the product or the price of the product. Especially when this guy over here is my buddy and he's financing my campaign. I'm going to go and get the product from him. So these are the incentives that government are subject to. And when you go, well, businesses are only after the bottom line, they're only profit seeking, blah blah blah. Yes, that might be true. They might have some bad incentives sometimes, but none so much as when they can earn $741 per dollar spent lobbying. That really will corrupt the business. But the bottom line is, on a free market, your only option is to compete to provide the best product at the best price. And yet, some people might not know that your product even exists. But you keep away at it, and then eventually, by word of mouth, hopefully it reaches those people. At least on average over time, markets have the incentive to provide the best service at the best price.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
And that's how we form national market fundamentalism. Thank you. Oh, yeah. You doing some questions?
I want to thank you for lot of gaps for me, so I really appreciate your
Oh,
leadership.
thank you.
Then it fills a gap.
Well, I do hear that quite a lot of people do with me. So
I'm kidding.
it's not taking off there. People are leaving.
No.
JD, wait a second, because he's a little bit early.
I have a question.
We know that,
So, guys, just give it a minute, please, because he's a little bit early at the moment.
so we know that, government,
JD, just a minute, please. Oh, it's just because they were taking orders. Go for it.
so we know that, government, will be mostly wrong and incapable of planning properly most of the time, but, you know, like a clock, it can be right once in a while. As we step into more progress, say with AI and computers being able to observe everything, do you think it's possible that the government clock could be right more than twice a day?
I love that question. Thank you so much. JD, yeah, you can clap for JD. He's an excellent human. He should constantly, like, I feel like when JD walks into places, there should be like,
Fucking A!
there should be angels singing.
Yes, there should.
Right, so it's a really good question. If anyone didn't hear it, it's like, okay, you know, even a stop clock's right a day, right twice a day. I like to say the market gets it right on average over time. And the reason why I say that is a lot of people say, well, Betamax was better than VHS, but VHS won out. But actually, and there's some debate about whether that's even true. But what won out in the long term? DVD won out. Then Blu-ray won out. So the market gets it right on average over time. So JD says, well, you know, as AI becomes more sophisticated, will you be able to centrally plan an economy? Because the AI, you just feed all the information into the AI. I think the problem with that is, and as with many things, I rely on Mises because he's the man. He had this really beautiful way of saying, look, humans aren't iron. Iron has always the same boiling point, the same conductivity. All iron is iron, right? But I subject you to Nicki Minaj, and you're like partying. And I subject you to Nicki Minaj, and you're like, what the fuck? Get me the hell out of this dive. So, I'm in the flower category. I've got a soft spot for Nicki, okay? Don't judge me. So the problem with feeding all the information into the AI is human beings have values and levels of information, interests, preferences that change from day to day. Like last year you thought you were on a health kick and you wanted to go keto. This year you think whole foods, plant-based diets where it's at. And you had no idea which way you were going to go. So by the time you could even feed the information to the AI, you don't even know. You need the constant interaction of buyers and sellers. Because here's a point that thank you, I should have mentioned at the beginning of my talk, which I forgot to mention. If I say to you, Stephanie, here's like just go into Walmart with my credit card and go nuts. Just buy whatever you want. It's not even me paying for it, right? She's going to buy a whole bunch of shit. She doesn't even want it. Well, she maybe won't do it because it's my credit card. I say, but you know what I mean. If I say just go nuts, take whatever you want, you're just going to buy everything. It's only when I say, do you want the Big Mac at this price or the Whopper at this price? You could say, well, I kind of prefer a Whopper, but it's a little bit more expensive than we go with the Big Mac, right? So it's only when and economists call that revealed preference, right? You reveal your preference by your behavior. Yeah, it's a good one, isn't it? You reveal your preference by your behavior on the market. If I say, what do you want? Oh, I'll have everything. Reinhardt's paying for it. I often do that when I go out to dinner.
Stop doing that. Pay for everything. Bastards.
But you know, if it's my down, I want to balance all the things I want and buy them in order. And given that that information is changing every day, every hour, like I thought I wanted to have ice cream, but then I finished my dinner and I was like, do you know what? Fuck it, I want to have. I could go without ice cream. I feel it. It sounded really great when I was hungry, but now that I'm not hungry anymore, I'm like, do you know what I can do without the calories? America taking its toll on me. I had a flat belly.
Oh,
I came
come
to
on.
this country. Okay, thanks. I'll try and keep my answers shorter because I'd like to hear more from you guys. Any questions and or statements?
I have a question. For the past 100 years since World War I, we
No
fought,
World War One again.
Yeah, go on. Keep rehashing it, bro.
we
It's
fought
over.
a number of wars to spread democracy, including a basic crusade for the past 20 years in the Middle East. So wouldn't democracy be more like a religion to us than the market?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was more of a point than a phrased as a question, but that's a good one, so I'm going to put it out there. The only religion when it comes to politics is democracy. It's not markets. There has never been any ideology in society which is so ubiquitously accepted without any examination or forethought.
Yeah.
What is the moral basis of democracy? Can I be rude? Can I be vulgar?
Yes.
Yeah.
Fuck it.
This is very bad if you're sensitive, cover your ears. 9 out of 10 people prefer gang rape.
Yeah, they do.
That is the logical conclusion of the argument for democracy, which is majority rule. I think that's a big laugh because I thought it was now someone's just going to take that clip and put it on Twitter. Antony Sammeroff, favorites. Yeah.
And even when the promises are proven to be empirically wrong, they still kept getting repeated over and over again. I mean, what was World War I? But the war to end all wars to make the world safe for democracy. And anybody who's ever read a book probably knows that World War I didn't actually end all wars. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, there's many problems with democracy. That would be a whole presentation. There's a really good book called The Myth of the Rational Voter by Brian Kaplan. And there's another good book that's very short called Beyond Democracy, and that's a good summary of all the arguments against democracy. Hello.
Have you been in Scotland for most of COVID?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I came to America about this time last year, and Scotland went into a second lockdown, and I was basically like, fuck that, I'm not going home to stay at four walls all winter. So I was meant to be away for 10 weeks, and I've been away for a year. But it's been great because I got to meet all you lovely people, and also the horrible ones.
That's true.
Who's got something for me? I can go all night. Yes, I didn't mean that ambiguously. Thanks for pointing it out with the chair.
Alright, so having traveled around the world and being from another country, if you had to leave the US, what country would you go
If I had to leave the US or the UK?
to?
Either. Both. Oh man, the US is not one country. Every city you go to has got a different culture, or several of them. This is one of my favorite cities. This is why I'm back.
G-Town, baby. Denver.
That's what all the rock bands say. Denver is one of our favorite places to play in every year. We look forward to come to Denver. Yeah, that's great. But no, I really love it here. I've got some lovely friends that live here as well. So if you're lucky, you come back, or unlucky depending on your estimation of me. I'll try and prepare better.
You did so good.
Oh, thank you.
First of all,
That's good.
it was awesome to
I'm
spot.
so glad you enjoyed it. JD, let's have one more.
One more question. So,
I didn't see
I hear
what
a lot.
country.
I hear a lot. People sometimes will say, "Well, yeah, but if you only have like two
That's a
have
good one.
choice, so is that a market failure? in
Is
your
that
imagination?
that could possibly be considered market failure. The word for it is monopsony. You know, a monopoly when you've only got one provider. A monopsony is when you've only got one buyer. Thank you. So what if you've got a town where there's only one person that employs everything? Let's say Flint, Michigan, as Michael Miller famously documented. General Motors built. I mean, how do you answer that question? One thing I would say is let's look at the really existing world rather than theory, because as economic enthusiasts we can get really bogged down in theory. So what you have in the most poor countries in the world are what some people call sweatshops. Or no, actually, in the most poor countries in the world, you couldn't even build a sweatshop there. Because you never know, because first of all, the government won't let you come in. You never know if you build a factory, someone's just going to take it away from you. You need to bribe the cops. In some countries in Africa, it can take anything between 12 months and 3 years just to get a license to open a business. So really, most of world poverty would be solved in the poor, what I'm saying is, in that monopsony situation, which is theoretical, you're getting labour at a knockdown price. That means any company with any sense is going to want to situate a plant there to take advantage of low wages. So the best situation would be if these countries where we have sweatshops just said, right, anyone who wants to can build a factory here. Because then all the people will come in, will build factories to take advantage of the cheap labour, and one by one they get the prices of labour up. Like Noam Chomsky, the great foreign policy expert and linguist, but terrible economists, says the only places that really have free markets are places where it's been rammed down their throat. The opposite is true. It's like these places these places are exactly the places which would just benefit from, when it's a free market, everyone come in and employ anyone you want, because the inflow of businesses to take advantage of cheap labour in a monopsony. What I'm trying to say is the monopsony situation is usually created by government. I can't see a reason why it would be created by the free market. Why would it? Why wouldn't everyone want to come in and take advantage of cheap labour? Where would I move? I used to think I spent like 6 months in India, and I thought that's a country that used to be really suffering under socialism, and from 1991 onwards became a more free market country and has begun to prosper. And you know, if you go, you can get a house somewhere nice for like, 80 grand or 60 or whatever, and go do yoga every day, delicious food, blah blah blah. But seeing how they responded to the pandemic, they're still not letting tourists in. So that was like a little bit of a disappointment. The usual places where people who want to live the high life that are from Western countries come from, Thailand. Thailand is, you can't go there unless you're vaxxed. So it's very difficult to say where would you like to live, because it's just completely fucking unpredictable. Would you have thought that Sweden would have been the country that didn't bring in regulations? Would you have thought that Australia was the worst regulated country? New Zealand was the 5th most free market country in the world. They had all of the policies that Bernie Sanders likes. They were like, for more, right? And they got a government that just said, fuck that shit, it's not working, we're going to cut back down the government. They were the 5th most free market country in the world. They had the most severe lockdowns. So how can you tell where to live? You just need to have faith that everything will work out for the better and do the best you can in your own life to spread a little love and joy. So the answer to your question, where would I move, depends where and when in space and time your question is situated. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'm doing more better.
Last question?
I'm willing to, yeah.
Last question.
Yo, are you sure this is the last one?
This is the last, my last one. As a UK individual, I would like kind of your impression and lessons from Brexit and kind of how that's going.
Thank
I guess
you.
I haven't heard a whole lot. And is there lessons that, you know, there's been a lot of talk here about, you know, seceding and
Yeah.
things like that. And so, seeing Brexit, does that mean that it's possible?
Thank you. If anyone didn't hear the question, he said, as a UK person, are there any lessons on Brexit from for America with secession? Like, what do you think happened with Brexit? Now, I've not really talked about this on any of my podcasts, but this is a good opportunity to talk about it. I may be in an extreme minority of libertarians who thinks that I probably, going back, running the clock, I would vote for Brexit again. But I don't think it was a good idea in this period, and I'm going to tell you why, right? Because you can't see it here. The most important thing is that you live in a cohesive society, right? So when you have this issue where we voted to come out of the European Union, and you had 52% in favour of coming out and 48% in favour of staying in, you do not have the political will to actually push it through. So all that happened is for 2 to 4 years, all we heard in the news was Brexit, 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 and everyone fucking hates each other, right? It's created so much.
We've never had that.
Exactly. I'm sure you're not familiar with that. It's created so much division and animosity. So the same for Scottish independence, where we had sort of 55 wanted to stay in and 45 wanted to come out. It's a demographic issue. As the population gets older, the young people want Scottish independence and the old people don't. So they're too early, they're jumping the gun. Give it another 5 or 10 years. So my advice is, and it's not going to be really very popular amongst libertarian crowds, is for any secession, you really need a 60%, 60-40 majority, because you need the cohesiveness to actually make shit happen. Because what's going to happen with Brexit, what has happened with Brexit is no one's happy. Britain is still in a bunch of pan-European treaties which regulate us, so the people who want out don't have what they want, and the people who want in don't have the open immigration in Europe and anything, so no one's happy. So the only thing I say is I'm totally for secession, I'm totally in favour of Brexit, I'm even in favour of Scottish independence, but I really want that 60 to 66% majority so that you can just fucking deliver, get the fuck out, make a clean break and start your own country. Because if you've got this thing pulling in two directions, in practical terms, even if your ideas are right, they're just not going to work. So those are my lessons from Brexit, and I was a bit naive to Brexit at the time.
What are your podcasts?
Scottish Liberty Podcast is a libertarian podcast. It's not just about Scotland. We get some talks like this. And also I am actually a libertarian theorist, so you'll hear some of my fresh ideas and developing on other ideas and trying to improve on the ideas that other people have already offered up. Or at least collect them all in one place so you don't need to put them up here, there and everywhere. I also have a personal development podcast called Be Yourself and Love It, which I'm very proud of. And that's all about like practical liberty, like what can you do in your own life to become a more happy, capable, competent person. And I've got a lot of good feedback on that podcast as well. Thanks very much for asking. And thank you so much for having me. It's been a great pleasure to talk with you.